Hi, I'm Steve Green. Welcome back to another video. What we're looking to do today is show you a couple of uses for Silverlight to extend some of the user interface, add a few extra tools, as well as look at how you can obviously interact with the standard controls on the form. And then in a second part, I'll cover data access, retrieving records from the REST endpoint using the link provider through Silverlight, and how we could use that in charts or tables, for example. So we'll start off by, we've got Visual Studio open. I'm going to be using the CRM demo solution again that you've probably seen in several of the previous videos. So I'll begin by clicking on that. If you want to see how to set up a solution from scratch, if you refer back to another video of mine called Create a Simple Plugin, which I go through the setting up and of the solution, choosing the correct template and connecting to the CRM instance. So if I close these components, so this is the solution we've been looking at in past videos. It's got the CRM package, a plugin solution, the standard Silverlight project, and a workflow project. I'm going to create a new Silverlight application, so it's got a more applicable name. So we're going to be doing, if I click and add new project and Silverlight, sorry. So Silverlight application, and we'll call it just CRM demo Silverlight. I'm not, well, I could create a website, which just makes it easier when you're looking for the actual XAP file, ZAP file, to upload into CRM, because I'm going to show you two ways of deploying, using the standard deploy method, and also just to manually browse the file through CRM, but I won't host it in a website. So we've got this extra CRM demo Silverlight component, which I need to add a reference to. I need to pick the solution file, so I need to browse to where that's created in my code folder, CRM demo Silverlight, and might have to build the solution first before I have the actual file available. Yeah. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, I had to do a build of the solution first before I could then add to this references and find the DLL for that demo Silverlight. I mean, what that does is then deploy the ZAP file directly as a web resource into CRM's solution, into the targeted solution. So this is the blank Silverlight component. You've got various standard Silverlight controls that you can obviously place into this designer and use, and they look almost identical to the CRM controls. I mean, you could probably play around with this style to get them identical, but I don't think they look out of place. So for this first example, what I thought of doing was showing you how to, say, put a standard slider. So if I stretch this out a bit, say 190 pixels I think it is, it's just a standard slider control. What we could use this for example, is, say, the opportunity. We could use it to replace the probability open sort of integer value that you can put in. So we can make that read only, put a little slider control. I mean, it's just one example, it's just to give you an idea of how Silverlight can sort of integrate into the form. So if we do that, if we take that slider control, look at the properties of it, So we want to say the maximum, obviously because it's a percentage, is 100. Let's move it in large chunks. So if we click the mouse far away from the cursor or the other side, it will move in 10 chunks of, or amounts of 10. And say if we use the cursor keys, the small change is just a smaller increment. Okay, so if I save that. Now to deploy, you can either right click the package as standard or build the solution, go to the web resources and manually sort of include the zap file. The issue with deploying is if you've got a lot of plugins and workflows, obviously you've possibly seen me pause it a lot on previous videos, it can take some time, and the Silverlight components are really small. So I'll show you both methods and so you can see the advantage and disadvantage. So if I deploy, okay, that took around just under a couple of minutes on my machine, which I've said before is I'm at home. This is deploying to a server in our office, so it's a little bit slower than if you were just on premise. You probably find it's quite speedy operation. But so now if I go to CRM, go to solutions, open my demo solution, look at the web resources, I should see. Sorry about that. No, I realised when I'd obviously referenced it, it hadn't. When I've deployed it, it hasn't appeared within my solution. But I believe I've done this reference incorrect. I browse to the DLL. What I need to do is obviously click on the Projects tab and pick my demo Silverlight, which should then add a similar looking reference, but it's now got a few more properties for the unique name for the web resource. So sorry about that. Now if I redeploy again, so I'll pop it on pause. Okay, that's deployed. So if I go back to my solution and I refresh my web resources, I now see my new CRM demo Silverlight component, which I now want to add to my opportunity form. So I expand entities, opportunity, click on the forms, pick my main form or double click it. So I was talking about making this probability percentage say read only and putting the slider above it or below it. So how I do that is obviously in this section I need to insert a web resource which will contain our Silverlight component. So if I click on that, I need to choose my web resource, so my CRM demo Silverlight component, give it a name, so we can say probability slider or something, doesn't matter what you call it. It obviously gives it a label, so we could just take away the word slider because this is what will appear on the form. Tick display, and then it's important obviously to choose a suitable formatting because we want this to fit in the width of one column. We need to obviously change the width to a single column, and we don't want it to obviously push rating right down that side of this section, so we'll make it a single row in height, and the size we'll leave just to use available area, obviously because it's bigger than the actual available area, so it'll be pushed sort of into the top left corner, which should line up quite nicely. So if I OK that, move that, say above probability percentage, and we'll mark that as read only. If I save and publish my customizations, just doing that, it hasn't popped up with the little. Ooh. Okay, sorry about that, my browser's just crashed. Okay, go back to where we were. Okay, so that, I don't know what happened to my browser there, but it looks as though it's published it because I saw a new window open. So we've got our little Silverlight component with a probability label, the percentage is underneath. I'll check and save and publish again. I mean, that didn't appear last time, as you saw. Okay, that's published. So if we close off that customized form, go to the sales area and opportunities, click new, we get our new form, and now we can see that slider I put on in the designer here, which you may have been up. I didn't really go over this design. This is just a standard sort of Silverlight XAML component. This is your sort of canvas area, and obviously this is the markup language that defines it, so it can be a little bit confusing the first time you look at Silverlight components, and it's probably why a lot of people shy away from them, but they're not really that complicated. I'm sure you can do some very whizzy things with them. I'm not by no means an expert. So if you go back to our opportunity, we've now got this slider which we want to wire up so that it alters this probability percentage field. So if I close my opportunity, come back to Visual Studio, so behind this XAML sort of user interface, there's a code behind file, which is what you can see here, this main page XAML CS file. If I double click that, that actually takes me to the code behind, the C# code, and we need to put code in now to make this able to interface and talk to the objects on the actual native CRM page. So we'll start by, we need to define a dynamic type, which I think we're new in .NET 4 and Visual Studio 2010. So if we call it dynamic XRM, this is what we're going to use to extract the XRM DOM object from the parent page that's hosting our control. So we'll be able to use that XRM so the standard XRM object model. And what I've got is a bit of code which I've copied and pasted just to extract that. So I've just took it from a previous Silverlight component I've done. Obviously, in order to get certain of these to be valid, like script object, we need to add this system.windows.browser namespace. So if I right click, that's now given me, it's understood the types. You can see it's grumbling about it when you're trying to use dynamic expressions and dynamic types. It's saying, are you missing a reference? What you need to do is add a reference to Microsoft.C#. This is obviously the new framework, and that then should disappear, and we've now got, it understands dynamic types, dynamic expressions. So what we're now able to do, if we go back to the designer, all sort of much like ASP.NET and standard Windows Forms design, your tools have events. So for instance, this slider, if I double click it, it wires up a slider.valueChanged event, which every time that slider's moved will trigger this event handler, which we can then put code within to do whatever we want that to do. So in this instance, we want to update the field below, which is the probability actual value, the percentage value, based on what the value of the slider is. And because this, with Silverlight, the main UI thread is this where the controls are based, is obviously the part of this main page. Any calls to event handlers is on another thread. So if you then wish to manipulate things on the same user interface thread where the main controls are, you have to use this dispatcher.begin invoke method, which looks confusing, but once you see it in action, it'll make sense. So what that's doing is declaring a delegate to send back to the main user interface thread to do commands, whatever we want it to do. So I hope I'm making some sense there. So if I recap, the UI thread where the control is actually housed, so on the control on this form, this Silverlight component slider is on a particular thread of the same as the user interface. When we move it, it triggers an event handler for the value changed, but that event handler, that different thread, hasn't got access to this user interface. So if we want to change like the potential customer field or the probability percentage, which is the one we're actually going to change, we need to do this method, this dispatcher.beginInvoke, which then calls back to the main user interface thread, passing these commands in that we want to do. So we can do our XRM page.data.entity.attributes.get. There's no shorthand, unfortunately, with when you've extracted the XRM object from the parent page. So I think it's called close probability is the name of that percentage field. Let's just check. If I customize the form, it's a little bit slow. So the field you want to update is this probability percentage, which is close probability. Yep. So if I go back to Visual Studio, so close probability dot set value, and I don't think I've actually named my slider. So sorry, if I go back to the XAML editor, click on the control, I didn't give it a name, so if we just call it percentage slider, just so when we reference it in code, that's the name we use. So go back to the code behind file. So the close probability, this is a standard XRM page object model. We're going to set value to percentage it's percentage slide. Should start to recognize. Yep, sorry, they took a while for the IntelliSense to catch up. Set value percentage slider dot value. So I hope that's made some sense. So the event handler for the slider control is going to send back this command to the user interface thread that originally the slider called this event handler from. So this is now where we need to obviously redeploy. If I use the standard deploy method, it's going to take a few minutes. Obviously I'll pause it and you don't see that wait time, but you'll find this when you're doing it yourself. An easier way is if I build the solution, it's now built, so that took a couple of seconds, it's built the little zap file for the Silverlight. If I now go back to web resources, double click my CRM demo Silverlight component and just browse to my CRM demo, there's my demo Silverlight, and in the bin debug folder you can see this extension, this .zap that's just been compiled, this 181k file. I can obviously browse to here. Once I've browsed to it once and saved it, if I subsequently come back here and I need to alter the Silverlight, re-upload it, I can just browse, it'll remember that location, I can click save, click publish, it takes what you just saw then 4 or 5 seconds, keep that window open and minimized, then I can go back to the form that calls it, reload, you should see, just refresh, it's only a small Silverlight component, didn't take long. Now when I move the slider, you can see it's calling that delegate, which passes back the XRM page set value command, and then obviously it's got the larger steps of 10 like you saw in the configuration. If you use cursor keys, moves in the small changes of 5. I mean, that's a very simple example of how obviously you don't have a standard slider control out of the box with CRM. It's just a simple example to show you how you can interact with the page. I mean, what we might want to do is not let this move in 1% increments. you might want to lock it to 5%. So again, what you could do is on the value changed, you could do a simple math function. So we could say use the modulus. So if percentage slider value, the mod command, which basically says if you divided it by that value after the modulus symbol, what remainder would you have? So it tells you whether it's exactly divisible by 5 or not. So if it's basically not a value that's exactly divisible by an increment of 5, we want to round it. So we could use some of the stuff. Excuse me, I just hit Control V paste by mistake. So we could use the round command to take the value, divide by 5. So that should, divide by the amount, the size of increment we're looking for, round it, and then times it back by 5. So it should be a whole, because it's been cast to an integer, it'll have been rounded either side of that. So if it was at 42, it would have been divided by 5. So it would have equaled 8 points something, 8.1, 8.2, something like that. Rounded down to 8 times by 5 will equal 40. So I hope that makes sense. And then obviously, because we've manipulated this value before it gets to the set value, it should now move in chunks of 5. So if I build, bring up my web resource screen, I minimize, browse, I'm already in the folder as previously stated, so you can see 551, which is now, it's slightly modified, it's grown by 1k for the extra line of code. Open, click save. Always wait for this upload file to blank after you click save, because you don't get any feedback to say it's saving. But until it's saved, now it's saved and it's gone blank, now you can publish. If you do it before that, it tends to mess up your browser. So that's published. So see how much quicker that is than deploying manually each time. And then if I refresh that new opportunity form, take a second for so Silverlight's loaded. Now you can see as I slide, it jumps in chunks of 5. Again, we can still use the large increment by clicking away either side, and obviously you won't tell very easily, but the cursor obviously was already set to do 5% changes, and that still works fine. There's one other tool I just want to quickly show you before I move on to a second part of the video, which is going to be actually a bit more complex, which is the data access. There is, as I say, there's many components that you can use in this standard Silverlight toolbox, all kind of standard controls that you would if you're used to designing ASP.NET apps and so on. And obviously one thing that CRM doesn't have is a password box field. So we could add one. Let's just move that just below, stretch it to the same length. So now I've got a slide. This is not obviously how you do in production. This is just to give you an idea of what tools are available. It's not supposed to be a full Silverlight tutorial by any means. So we've got this password box. So we can give it a name. We'll call it the same as the type password box. And we can use that in the same kind of way. So if I just show you, if I save, build, it's built. Still got my web resource screen open, browse, pick my little zap file, click save, wait a few seconds for that to go blank. It's gone blank, publish, and then that's published. I can minimize that, bring my opportunity back. I'll need to just customize this form again, because obviously we've only given it one row of space, so we won't see that other control, it'll be cut off. Double click that, component, formatting, give it a second row so we can see. I mean, you wouldn't normally put two controls one on top of each other like that. You'd have maybe designed another Silverlight component, or started to use, I think you can use pages, and when you, well, I won't go into it because it'll confuse. So we've now got a 2-row high Silverlight component, which is published. If I refresh that form, it'll reload that Silverlight component in. So now we can see our slider that controls our probability field, and we've got a password field, which we could say wire up. We could build a password field in CRM that this could update behind the scenes, so no one would have to actually see the password. I mean, for this we'll just wire it up to write it into the description as this changes. So back to Visual Studio, back to our CS. Well, sorry, go to the designer. If I click on the password control, you've got, this is the properties with the spanner. To the right, there's a little bolt of lightning, which is the event handlers. So you can see all the different event handlers that control offers. You could use key up, key down, but there's one that actually says password change. If I double click in it, it creates this event handler, which again, we can do the same kind of thing. It's obviously on a different thread because it's an event handler. It's come away from the user interface thread. We can use this dispatcher dot begin invoke. Obviously the attribute we're going to alter is description, and the value is obviously not the percentage slider. It's our password box dot password property, which is the password you've typed in. So it's again pretty simple. A couple of lines of code. Save that. Build solution. It's built. Bring our web resource up. Browse. Click our zap file. Click save. Wait a few seconds. I mean, this will be quicker on premise, as I've said before, so you may not have this pause. That's saved. Publish. Minimize that. Open opportunity. Refresh the form. So wait for that to load. It takes a few seconds. So slider's working now. As I type a password in, you can see real time it triggers that event handler, which is writing to our description field. So, but you've got it, the password masked. Obviously, you wouldn't, as I said a few seconds ago, you wouldn't write to a publicly visible field on the form. You'd hide it away. But it's an option. It's just another example of how you can use Silverlight to enhance the user interface. So I'll end this video here. In the next video, I'm going to look at possibly doing some kind of chart that will retrieve existing values within the system using the REST endpoint, which I'll go through the process of connecting the references for the Silverlight application and how to query using the link provider. Okay, so thanks for listening again. Any comments or requests, please feel free to post them below.